Sleep can kill you faster than hunger in extreme cold. That's not a metaphor. It's a rule soldiers learned the hard way, written in frostbite, trench warfare, and frozen battlefields where a single bad night meant you never woke up. For centuries, armies fighting winter wars followed a brutal, counterintuitive sleep rule that went against basic comfort and human instinct. It wasn't about warmth. It wasn't about rest. It was about survival. And the people who ignored it paid a price that history quietly buried under snow. This rule wasn't soft. It wasn't optional. And it saved lives long before sleeping bags, Gore-Tex, or heated barracks ever existed. Let's break it down. Another brutal adaptation was fragmented sleep. In extreme cold, long, uninterrupted sleep was dangerous. Soldiers were trained to wake periodically, even when exhausted, sometimes every hour, sometimes every 2 hours. Guards weren't the only reason. Movement restored circulation. Checking extremities prevented frostbite from going unnoticed. Readjusting layers prevented overheating or moisture buildup. This wasn't theoretical. During World War II, German and Soviet units on the Eastern Front reported soldiers freezing to death while asleep just feet from others who survived by waking, moving, and managing heat. Sleep deprivation was awful, but death was worse. The no-blanket myth. One of the most misunderstood aspects of cold weather survival is the idea that more insulation is always better. Soldiers learned that piling on blankets could be dangerous if it trapped moisture or prevented airflow. In some conditions, lighter insulation with controlled heat production worked better than heavy coverings. This doesn't mean soldiers slept exposed. It means insulation had to breathe. Historical accounts describe soldiers loosening clothing before sleep, opening coats, or even briefly exposing skin to cold air to drive off moisture before bedding down. It was uncomfortable. It worked. Fire wasn't the solution you think. Campfires feel like the obvious answer, but soldiers learned quickly that fire could betray you. Fires melted snow into water. Water soaked clothing. Sparks burned holes in wool. Smoke attracted enemies. And worst of all, fires created dramatic temperature swings. Men would warm up fast, sweat heavily, then move away from the fire and freeze harder than before. That's why many cold weather units limited fire use at night. They relied instead on controlled body heat, shared shelters, and disciplined sleep routines. Warmth wasn't the goal, stability was. The psychology of cold sleep. Here's something chilling. Hypothermia makes you feel comfortable right before it kills you. Soldiers described a false sense of warmth, calm, and even euphoria as their core temperature dropped. Some removed clothing. Some fell asleep peacefully and never woke up. The sleep rule existed to fight that psychological trap. Going to sleep slightly cold kept soldiers alert to danger. It forced awareness. It prevented the body from slipping into shutdown mode unnoticed. Discomfort was a warning system, how this knowledge was passed down. This rule wasn't written in one place. It spread through experience, oral instruction, and harsh correction. Recruits learned from veterans. Arctic explorers shared notes. Military manuals quietly incorporated the lesson without dramatizing it. By the early 20th century, winter warfare training across Europe emphasized moisture management, controlled sleep, and deliberate discomfort. These ideas shaped later survival training programs that still exist today, though modern gear has softened the edges. But the principle hasn't changed. What still applies today? Modern sleeping bags and insulated clothing make cold sleep safer, but the human body hasn't changed. Sweat still kills insulation. Overheating still backfires. Long, deep sleep in extreme cold is still risky without proper conditions. Backcountry survival experts still teach versions of this rule. Vent before sleep. Start cool. Stay dry. Manage moisture. Wake periodically in severe cold. These aren't old myths. They're lessons written by people who didn't have second chances. The real takeaway: the brutal cold weather sleep rule wasn't about toughness. It was about understanding how the body actually works under stress. Comfort is seductive. Cold doesn't forgive it. Soldiers survived winter not by fighting the cold head-on, but by working with their biology. They learned when to be uncomfortable, when to rest, and when to force themselves awake. That knowledge is easy to forget in a modern world. It's also easy to underestimate. History shows what happens when you do. If this kind of forgotten survival knowledge matters to you, you're in the right place. Legacy of survival exists to keep these lessons alive, not as trivia, but as practical wisdom earned the hard way. If you found this valuable, take a second to like the video. Subscribe for more real survival history that actually teaches you something. And share it with someone who loves history, the outdoors, or both. Because some rules are uncomfortable for a reason,